Welcome, everyone. This is the DFS Bum. All right. Merry Christmas. Happy holidays. We have a little Friday afternoon showdown here Friday. Minnesota Vikings at the New Orleans Saints. So hopefully you guys are enjoying the holidays. Before we get in the game, please subscribe to the channel if you've not done so yet. I would greatly appreciate that. I've been doing really well with my total view hours. Could use a little bump up in the subscribers to be eligible for the YouTube monetization program, which is my goal for 2021. And then we can start to do little giveaways with that. So, all right, guys, let's get into it here. And maybe we'll have some normalcy. Before I talk about the players, let's just recap last weekend. Kind of strange starting off Thursday night. Showdown, Mariota, comes in. Carr got hurt so early in the game. So, I mean, what are the chances that the quarterback, gets hurt that early in the game, or the backup can come in and then end up being the MVP or in that top spot? So that was pretty wild. And then we go to the Saturday night, and what was the deal then? I can't remember. I think that was relatively straightforward. But then I know the other night with the Cleveland Browns, I thought that was a little bit strange. All my lineups had either Kareem Hunt or Chubb in them, and I just thought for certain one of those guys would be in that winning lineup, and neither one was. And then last night, Monday night, the third string quarterback with the Bengals just about what doubles the output of Big Ben going against that Pittsburgh Steelers defense. So pretty crazy. And now we've got the Saints, which they're actually a pretty fun team to have in a showdown just because they spread the ball out so much. So we could potentially have some weirdness continuing into this. But hey, I guess to some degree the weirdness is okay because it doesn't really result in big ties. And people are having some nice takedowns. So sometimes I guess it pays off just to do that contrarian play. All right, guys, so let's get into the game here. Starting off at quarterbacks. Drew Brees is back. We got Kirk Cousins. Brees is coming in with a price tag at $14,500 on Fanduel and DraftKings. Going against Minnesota, their overall defense is 24th. Against opposing quarterbacks, they're 13. Looked like Brees came back last week, gave you 20 points. And I suppose that, with him, I'll definitely throw him in some MVP spots, but I'm just not really feeling it in this game. I think it's going to be somebody in one of those skill positions. But nonetheless, he's just a good quarterback. And both these guys, I'm sure I'll throw into the MVP spot. DraftKings, they're a little bit pricier, so I can see that maybe being a less likely scenario with that salary multiplier in there. But in regards to Cousins, he's 14,000 on both the sites. His matchup really tough. New Orleans is 6 overall defense, 6 against opposing quarterbacks. So you could see him, potentially struggling. Cousins last 5 games, 20, 17, 22, 26, 23. Something with Brees, I'll go back. Before he had gotten hurt, the one game he did get hurt, 7 points, so kind of anomaly. But then before that, 23, 20, 24 points. So pretty darn consistent. And they're both averaging about 18.5 points for the year. All right, let's take a look at some of the pass catchers. And between the wide receivers and tight ends, that's with the Saints. I just saw the other day like this. This Humphrey guy just comes out of the blue. That's exactly what I'm talking about. Like Lil Jordan Humphrey. I never even heard of the motherfucker. So he comes in, gets 4 targets, 10 points, scored that touchdown at the end of the game. Or near the end of the game. So anyhow, and I'll get to these guys a little bit more in depth here in a second, but that guy just popped right up, and that was the first thing I was thinking of when I knew this game was coming up. Is like, man, yeah, it could be interesting. So, all right, let's get to the more known commodities. So we've got a rookie here, Justin Jefferson, 12,500 on FanDuel and DraftKings. I like him as a potential MVP candidate, especially on DraftKings with that cheaper salary. Matchup for them, pretty solid. The Saints are 17th against opposing wide receivers. So even though their overall defense is tough and they're good against quarterbacks, middle of the road when it comes to receivers. Jefferson averaging about 7.5 targets for the year, 14.5 points. Lately, just been a target monster the last 3 weeks. Targets 11, 8, and 12. We going back with points with him, 14, 8, 23, 23, and 16. So just good, solid, consistent production from him. And then we have his running mate at receiver, Thielen. Adam Thielen here is coming in at 12,000 on both sites. Another guy I like at that MVP spot, particularly in DraftKings with that lower salary. Targets for him for the year 7, 14.5 points also. Doesn't look like maybe he's been as involved in the offense as much last couple of weeks. The targets were only 3 and 4, and then we go back 3 weeks ago before he had 11. Point wise, he's been 8, 5, 18. Looked like he didn't play, and then 28 point monster game going back 5 games ago. And then from there, I might as well just round out any of the other guys with Minnesota since we're talking about them. And for me, you could maybe get a guy like Chad Baby. He averaged 2.5 targets for the year, about 2.5 points. He's only 6,000 on both slates, so he's definitely cheap. Outside of that, I don't know if there's really a whole lot more to say. Let's see here, going down with Minnesota. I don't know, maybe Johnson. Though with the was it BC Johnson with Minnesota, 2.5 targets, 3.5 points. But this dude, I don't really know. Like it doesn't look like he hasn't really played hardly at all this year, I think, or at least the last couple games. So I probably won't even fuck around and have him in the lineup. And maybe a little bit of this Baby guy, but with him, we go back the last 5 games. His points are 3, 0, 2, 14, and 0. So again, that 14-point game, that's the type of thing you're looking at with some of these cheap guys. They get one big play and a touchdown, and then next thing you know, you'll find them in that top lineup. They're typically lower owned too, so that's another thing that's not bad about them. It does have a less potential to have some of those bigger ties. All right, so now onto the Saints side of the ball. And I think overall we're relatively healthy for this game, other than Michael Thomas is out on that injured reserve. So that gets guys like Emmanuel Sanders, Traequin Smith, possibly some dark horse candidates for MVP. With me, I'm not really certain what I'll do with that. I guess I'm just going to have to kind of get into, to the lineups before I decide whether I'm going to devote any MVP slots to those guys. And I think I just might. Hell, why not? Like, everything's just been so fucking weird lately. And I like the matchup going against Minnesota. They're 30th against opposing receivers. So you take that into account, and it probably wouldn't be surprising to necessarily see one of those guys. Though at the same time, I'm not going to bet the farm on it. Maybe I'll try to do it with about maybe 10 lineups a piece or something like that with those guys. But as far as price tag and whatnot, Sanders 10,500 on FanDuel. And you know what? I'm actually looking on here. I didn't know if they have DraftKings. I don't think they have the pricing updated right now on DraftKings. If it is, it's all the same, which would be a little bit odd. But I guess nonetheless, regardless of the pricing, we all know we got to fit the guys into the salary and into the salary cap that we have, and the pricing trends are somewhat similar between the two sites. Now with Sanders for the year, about 5.5 targets, about 9 points. Last 5 weeks for him, production 10, 12, 6, 1, and 9. So, and I guess one thing too with it is, like, say if Hill had still been quarterback, I wouldn't fuck around with those guys, but Drew Brees is back in there now too. So, I do probably think, like I say, it might make a little bit of sense. Traequin Smith, a little bit younger receiver for the year, 3.5 targets, about 6 points last 5 weeks for him. Production 3, 8, 12, 2, and 0. So a little bit up and down, but again, with Michael Thomas out, you like his potential to come in there and have potentially a good game. And then from here, with the rest of the guys on New Orleans, like I mentioned, this Humphrey guy kind of came out of nowhere last week, and that was the first time he scored all year. And so the fact that Thomas is out, he probably, I imagine, was on their practice squad, got brought up. Another guy, you got Tommy Lee Lewis, little small slot receiver sort of guy. Both these guys 5,500 on FanDuel. I'm sure they're really cheap on DraftKings as well. Tommy Lee Lewis hasn't averaged a target or a point for the year. 3 games ago, he scored 2 points. 4 games ago, he had 1 point. So, again, it would be hard pressed to really get too crazy with him. But it's just like if there's a time to do it, and a team to do it with, the Saints, those are the ones to, or, that's the type of team that some shit like that's going to happen. Um, Maybe even Jawan Johnson. He's a guy too. Probably another guy that they might have brought off of the practice squad or something. For the year, he hasn't really done a whole lot, like only 0.5 points, but he did have 4 targets last week. No points. So, it's just one of those things. Like that, like I say, the Saints are constantly like, pulling guys out of the woodworks, and you're like, who the hell is this? I mean, in fact, and sometimes they're like one of the few teams. I think that's the only team I've ever seen. In fact, it was Tommy Lee Lewis, like last year, where the first touchdown of the game, Brees throws to that guy, and the guy wasn't even in the Fanduel tournament. He was like so new. And normally they've got guys that were on the team that have been waived like months ago and stuff. So anyhow, it's kind of funny, the way that happens sometimes. So, all right, let's look at the tight ends. Pretty decent option here, I suppose, with Jared Cook. About 4 targets for the year, about 6.5, 7 points, only 9,500. Matchup, middle of the road. Vikings are 13th against opposing quarterbacks. With Cook, the last couple weeks, production 4, 11, 10, 0, and 1. So I don't really know what you're going to get out of him. But I'll have him in some lineups. I'm not going to take him to MVP spot. For me, that's just like too big of a leap, I think, to do that. Some other guys there with the Saints to potentially consider: Josh Hill and Trautman. Hill's out there for 41% of the snaps, Trautman 34%. Their usage rate, though, is 3 and 4%. They're super cheap, like 6,000 and 5,500. Again, it's one of those guys, they might sneak in a touchdown for you. They've only been averaging Hill about a point. He's only scored 1 point the last 5 weeks. Trautman's a little bit more involved. If you look back the last 5 weeks, he did not score last week, but then 2, 2, 1, and 2. So who knows when those guys were used, or when he was used a little bit more. Hill was in there at quarterback. So, and speaking of Hill, I wonder if he's hurt. I don't see him listed right now, unless they have him still at quarterback. I'm going to check that out real quick. So either one of those guys, like I say, it's just more of that contrarian play. If you're doing cash lineups, they're probably not really worth screwing around with. So, all right, Taysom Hill is still listed under the quarterback. So I thought we'd get him in tight ends, but we might as well just talk, and there's no positions in the single game, so we don't have to worry about it. But Taysom Hill, obviously a guy that he's just kind of that Swiss Army knife, I feel. He can get you points, through running the ball potentially, some trick play, wildcat, you name it. So that's another guy. And Taysom Hill's only 10,000 on FanDuel. So getting back to the other side of the ball, we have Irv Smith and Conklin with the Vikings. Conklin, interesting. He out of and I guess it could be their normal tight end. Rudolph. Looked like he's out right now. So if you go back with Conklin, last 2 weeks his targets were 4 and 5. His points were 13 and 7. Before that, really not much to do for the year. So actually, that's interesting. So yeah, again, there's a lot of like cheap plays in here that could go. I could see. It's almost like likely to some degree that one of these real cheap guys will score, because there's so many fairly decent cheap options. Irv Smith, another guy, a little bit younger, tight end. For the year, about 3 targets, about 5.5 points. I'd cut really more. He's almost kind of like more of a glorified slot man to some degree. Matchup for those guys, the Minnesota tight end's a little bit decent too. It's 18th. So anyhow, Irv Smith, just a little bit cheaper. For him, though, production's been really up and down. He had 5 points last week, then 14. 2 weeks with no points. Not really sure if he was injured, didn't play, and then 3 points. So none of these guys in the tight end spot. And then even with Taysom Hill, I'm sure some people have Taysom Hill as an MVP, but I don't see myself doing that. With really any of these guys that are going to be coming out of that spot. All right, let's take a look at the running backs here. So this is where we got our 2 big studs, the 2 guys that I imagine will probably have the highest MVP ownership. We've got Kamara coming in at 15,000. Dalvin Cook is 16,000. Both of them just having hell of a year. With Cook, the thing about him that it might be a little bit worrisome is just the matchup. The Saints are number one against opposing running backs. So just something to keep in mind there. So on DraftKings, for example, when you have the salary multiplier, maybe that is something that might, maybe just again, something to keep in mind. And it probably will be heavily owned in that spot. So it would maybe make sense just to get some variety and not get totally locked on to him. For the year, been carrying the ball about 23 times, 4 targets, 23 points. The last 5 weeks, production 24, 18, 21, 8, and 23. So I'll certainly be having a fair amount of him. But again, as we learned, you just want to have a little bit, if you're doing a lot of lineups, just to have a little bit of that variety and diversity. Kind of almost think of almost like a mutual fund of players, so to speak, and that you're not too heavy in any one area. And so hopefully, regardless of what happens, you're going to be, giving yourself a shot at all game to be able to potentially take home first place. So other side of the ball there, we've got Kamara, a good solid year. He's coming in at 15,000, carrying the ball about 12 times, 7 targets, 20 points. For him, production 17, 19, 17, 6, and 11. And really, he had a couple of maybe subpar games when Taysom Hill was a quarterback, but typically when Brees is in there, he's usually the lead target guy, and kind of the one guy out of the Saints that I feel you can kind of just like hang your hat most days on Kamara. And whereas everybody else, it's just really kind of hodgepodge as far as who's going to go off. And then from here, we've got some pretty decent backups too, guys that you shouldn't be too quick to write off. Latavius Murray, for the year, 9, almost 10 carries, about 1.5, 2 targets a game, 8 points. He scored a touchdown last week. Boy, I thought he scored more than 10 points. But yeah, for the last 5 games, production 10, 1, 3, 25, and 10. So same thing when Taysom Hill was in there, he probably struggled more. I'd imagine just in general, a lot more defenders down in the box with Hill at quarterback. So it just makes sense for those running backs to possibly struggle. Pretty decent matchup for both of those Saints running backs going against Minnesota. They're 17th overall. And outside of that, you have Michael Burton at fullback, which again, you never know. Maybe in the red zone, 1st and goal, they do some play and dump it off to him. But I don't think I'll probably throw him into any lineups at all, just because I just think there's some other lower priced guys that have better upside. And then jumping back over to Minnesota, Tyson Cook's back up. He's a pretty solid guy. 6 carries for the year, 1 target, only 4 and about 4.5 points. So with him, his production the last 5 games, 2, 0, 0, 1, and 1. So probably the idea, at least with me, is I'll throw him in some lineups, but I'll certainly make sure that Cook isn't in there. And the idea is when Cook is out, that guy does seem to produce pretty decently. Again, he's got a tougher matchup, so I'm not going to get crazy. Maybe I'll do 5 to 8 lineups or something like that, and then make sure that Cook is in there, and that'll be kind of the idea that Cook gets hurt. And so Matison comes in and takes the bulk of the carriers. And then outside of that, Amir Abdullah, ex-Lion, occasionally is involved in or maybe not more than occasionally, I think he's their main kick returner, or at least punt returner. But he gets out there every once in a while too. Pretty explosive guy, but so again, that's another deep dive. I could see him sneaking in a touchdown possibly. I know he's come close the handful of games I've watched Minnesota play this year. Seems like he might come in at times, maybe like as a 3rd down back. But then when he does come in, it's only 5% of the snaps. But you do see when he's in there, he does touch the ball 27% of the time. So from that, kickers. Oh, and I know what I was going to say. The other weird thing that happened. I knew something else weird had happened. I always, remind me of this with kickers. So I'd always say I'd never seen 2 kickers in the top lineup, and that actually did happen. The other night, and it was what game was it? It was 2 quarterbacks. Oh, it was the Packers game. So yeah, that was it. The 2 quarterbacks, they're 2 freaking kickers, and then Aaron Jones was the MVP on Fanduel. And that, so again, other weirdness. I've never just, it was like last week when it was a week in the first. I knew there was something else that was screwy. So anyway, getting back to this week with these guys, I don't know. I more just play the odds, and if shit doesn't go, it goes against the odds, then fuck it. So, as far as playing two kickers together again, if I ever do it, and I have done it in the past, but it's always like a stack. In this case, I would probably do maybe in theory, it might be a stack of the New Orleans Saints players with Lutz, if I were to do such thing. For the year, Lutz averaging about 8 points, Bailey about 5. So one thing I probably will do is I could see myself really fading Bailey. Not 100%, but he's probably not going to be in a whole lot of lineups. I just don't think he's really all that good of a kicker. And anyway, they're just limited, I feel, in their upside to some degree. So yeah, that's kind of my thoughts there. And then, for you guys that play DraftKings, of course, you have the defenses there. And, the Saints overall, pretty solid defense. So that might be something to consider into your spots as well. So anyhow, we'll go ahead. We'll wrap the video up for now. So again, I hope you guys are enjoying the holidays. And if you're out driving, you're being safe. If you have to travel anywhere, I should have the Saturday video out here in a day or so. I might end up missing some of the NBA videos. I'll be gone later this weekend, but I think at least with the NFL, I can get those out before I go out of town, and then from there I'll just do the best I can with the NBA and some of the other stuff coming up. But after the holidays get over, and then same thing with New Year's Eve, I got a couple things going on, but so there I might miss a couple things, but for the most part I should be able to hit them. And then we'll be into January with the NFL playoffs and the NBA going, so it's going to be an exciting start to the new year. So all right, guys, go out, kick some ass this weekend. Safe travels if you're out and about. And last thing, please subscribe if you have not done so already. All right, guys, peace out, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye.